Good morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead. And as you can see, Jim has been at it again. He just spoils me rotten, and I love every minute of it. I think this is the second time this month that he has brought me roses. Today we are going to be talking about something really serious, and that is about vacuum sealing, and we have done several videos so far on vacuum sealing. But this topic we have not yet covered before, and that is the dangers that are associated with vacuum sealing if you don't have complete knowledge about some of the safety concerns. We did a video, 3 weeks ago maybe, on vacuum sealing and oxygen absorbers for dry foods for long-term storage. And that's only half the story, is when we work with dry foods that are already shelf stable. The other half of the story is about perishable foods, or wet foods as we are calling them in this video, and that's where the danger lies. A couple of weeks ago, maybe not quite that long ago, we got an email sent to us through our bookstore. This viewer's name was also Pam, and which I thought was lovely. I love that name. And she was pretty adamant about an experience that she had had on the internet. She had run into an ad for a product like this, a little handheld vacuum sealer, that she said just horrified her. She said she recognized immediately what the false claims were, or the misconceptions, if we're being polite, on the video, and she wasn't concerned about herself because she picked it up right away, as I believe most of you would have also. But her concern, and ours as well, is for those in our audience, and we have lots of them, who are just new to food preservation and particularly maybe new to vacuum sealing. And she was really worried that some of the claims that were made in that ad might lead people down a dangerous path, and indeed they would have. Jim and I looked at that video, and we also were horrified. But we didn't leave it there. We decided, my gosh, if this is out there and people are seeing this, what else might be out there? And so we took quite a bit of time and reviewed a number of YouTube channels where they talked about vacuum sealing, and also web pages that talked about vacuum sealing. And I collected a little bit of data on those, and it was just interesting, particularly when it comes to perishable or wet foods. About 1 in 5 of the presentations that we looked at were accurate. The information that they presented was accurate, scientific, food science safety information. Some of them were really close, but they omitted some really important things that needed to be said. And so those went on the 80% of not being 100% correct. This ad, of course, led the ones that were not correct. Now, we're not going to name anyone because, and I know you may be really curious about just who this was, so you can rush out and watch that video, but we are more concerned about the broad spread misconceptions that exist out on the internet concerning perishable food when it is vacuum sealed. So we are going to address some of the claims that came from that ad, as well as some of the videos that we saw. One of the 3 main pillars of our channel is self-reliance. And we have talked many times about how knowledge is power. And so today we're going to review some of the safety issues surrounding vacuum sealing in general, and with a specific emphasis on wet foods. And this will be a really good reminder for those of you who already know. We feel like probably 95% or more of our viewers would not be duped into believing pretty much anything that was stated on this ad. And whether it was deliberate or not deliberate, whether it was just they hired people who didn't know food science to write the ad, it doesn't matter, because the information is out there, it is misleading, and it can be very dangerous, and they're not the only ones where this is the case. One woman who was just almost all right was in a little YouTube video showing off her brand new vacuum sealer. She was just so delighted. She just was almost bubbly about the fact that she had this new vacuum sealer, and she was going to show us how it worked. And they had just harvested corn on the cob from their garden, and so she was going to vacuum seal corn on the cob, and she did everything right. She blanched it, she put it into an ice water bath to cool it down immediately so it would not continue cooking. She dried it off. She put it in the bag. She vacuum sealed it. It was perfect. And she held it up and she said, now I'm going to be able to have this delicious corn in the middle of December. Never once did she state how that corn was going to be stored. And as a viewer, if you are brand new to vacuum sealing, you may think it's okay because it's vacuum sealed to put it on the shelf. Or would it go in the refrigerator and could it keep vacuum sealed until December? No, it wouldn't. And so obviously the hint was that she was going to have it in December. So those of us who understand those things made the appropriate leap to know that she was going to put it in the freezer. But when you leave out a leap like that, it loses people who don't have a complete knowledge base. And so hopefully Jim and I are so conscious about wanting to present information in such a way that is complete and accurate. We talk things over all the time and check each other by both of us doing independent research and coming together to talk about things. And that's what this video is. So as a result of seeing how many false claims and omissions that were in the vacuum sealing materials that we saw, two things have happened for us. Number one, we're doing this video. And number two, we found such information that we believe that we need to write a book about vacuum sealing, covering both dry foods and wet foods and equipment and the whole thing. And so that's going to be our project through the holidays, and hopefully we'll have that book ready for spring because, like Pam, our viewer who sent me that link, we were pretty horrified with what we found. And so we felt like there needs to be another very loud voice out there that teaches correct principles so that people can make their own decisions. So it doesn't matter whether we tell you who is offending or not. The bottom line is, when you leave this video and later, if you get that book that we're talking about, you will be armed with the knowledge that it doesn't matter what the source is. You will know and be able to spot immediately things that are incorrect. So based on some of the false information, misconceptions that we found in our review of those sites on the internet and YouTube, we've presented some 5 things that we're going to be talking about today. And 3 of them are statements about vacuum sealing safety. First of all, vacuum sealing is not the same as canning. Some people seem to think that it is, that if you vacuum seal something, that it makes it just as safe as canning. But I want to read you the USDA definition of what canning is. This process involves placing food. Well, the purpose of canning is that it uses heat and airtight containers to destroy microorganisms and inactivate enzymes, extending shelf life and preventing spoilage. This process involves placing food in sealed jars or cans, heating it to a specific temperature to kill bacteria and other spoilage-causing organisms, and creating a vacuum seal as the food cools, which prevents recontamination. For low-acid foods like meats and most vegetables, a pressure canner is required to reach temperatures of 240 degrees F, while high-acid foods like fruits can be safely canned using a boiling water bath. Always, always use tested recipes when canning because the cooking times have been established through rigorous scientific testing by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we always stress using tested recipes. So that is what canning is. So when an ad calls this a canning device, that is totally false. There is nothing about this that turns it into a device with which you can can. This is a vacuum sealer, not a canning device. We'll get to more on that in just a little bit. Okay, so next up is vacuum sealing does not make food shelf stable. Some people think that when you can vacuum seal it, then you can put it on your shelf regardless of what the food is. And that is absolutely not the case. The ad, for instance, showed putting blueberries and strawberries into a jar and vacuum sealing them. And they looked gorgeous behind them, and while they did not say where these should be stored, the implication was you could easily interpret that these could go right on the pantry shelf because that was what was in the scene behind them. So we did a little bit of an experiment. So in the ad, they had some blueberries and some strawberries that they had put in pint jars, and then they had vacuum sealed them. And then they left it up to the viewer. They didn't say where to store them, but what they did say was, if you remove the air, there is no chance for spoiling. So we decided to test that out. Because they didn't specify where to put it, we put these two, 9 days ago is when we did this, we put these two in the refrigerator. The strawberries themselves came from this package, and we didn't do anything to this package except just leave it right in the refrigerator for 9 days. And you can see that these are well past their use date. We wouldn't use any of these. The ones here that have been in the refrigerator are still very nice. And they were vacuum sealed, but you can see we can easily, there was a little soft spot right there because it's 9 days. And we do know that vacuum sealing extends the shelf life, even in a refrigerator. But these I wouldn't hesitate to eat. And the same with the blueberries. But because they didn't stipulate where to put them, we also put some out on the countertop. These two have been out on the counter, not in refrigeration for 9 days. And I don't even want to open these strawberries. They were vacuum sealed. And the blueberries are also breaking down. They're not as bad as the strawberries, but it looks to me like there's even some bubbles, which means a little bit of fermentation. So these I would not even want to open. When I open those, I'm going to run water in them and run them down the garbage disposal immediately. These would still work. So that shows that vacuum sealing does not make food shelf stable. So then if vacuum sealing isn't the same as canning and it doesn't make food shelf stable, what does it do? Well, really the only thing that it does is it extends the preservation life or the shelf life of foods. That foods last a little longer after they have been vacuum sealed, provided they are put in the correct storage location. And that's what is so important. So right here, dry foods are shelf stable. They have less than 5% moisture. And our whole video, I'm going to put the link to that video we did 2 or 3 weeks ago at the end of this video so that you can check back on how to do dry foods in much more detail with some scientific information there as well. But for instance, this is our pantry container of 6-grain cereal. It's rolled cereal, looks just like oatmeal. We use this all the time. We go through it very, very fast. It is shelf stable. We have had this for well over a year. It comes in 5-gallon buckets. We opened the bucket over a year ago. We're going through it. Are we down almost to the bottom of the bucket, Jim? You just refilled this yesterday?
It's still about a quarter full.
Okay, so not quite.
No.
And I haven't even bothered in that other barrel out there. It was vacuum sealed when it arrived, but we just keep the lid on it tightly and it's just fine. So it is shelf stable. But what if I want to increase the shelf stability of that? Well, all I would need to do is to put some of this into a package. In this case, I'm choosing to use a mason jar. And I use previously used lids that I've used for canning. I cannot reuse them for canning, but I can certainly use them for vacuum sealing. And I am going to this time use my Weston vacuum sealer. This is a really good brand of vacuum sealer. And it has an accessory port where I just put this hose and it diverts the vacuum instead of coming through this part of the machine. It diverts the vacuum through this hose, and I attach the hose to this accessory that goes right over the top here and fastens in place. I turn the machine on and then just press the accessory and it's going to pull the air out of there. So now the air is pulled out and that's telling me that I can now take this off and take this off. And this is sealed. This is a far more powerful seal than this is, even though I love this and I use it a lot. But now, because this is vacuum sealed, it's going to have a longer shelf life than this that is not vacuum sealed. And so we can store dry foods at room temperature because they are shelf stable. This is another example of dried food. This is some apples from our apple tree from 2023 in August. And so these have been vacuum sealed. When I put them on the shelf, they're over 2 years old, out on the shelf much longer, and still as good as anything because we vacuum sealed them. So that's dry goods. Now what we want to do is spend the rest of our time with perishable food or wet food. Wet food is perishable. It is not shelf stable. The strawberries and the blueberries, they are not shelf stable. They have to be put in cold storage for protection and for preservation. Vacuum sealing them, as we saw, does extend the shelf life inside the refrigerator. That's what vacuum sealing does. Then vacuum sealing does not turn them shelf stable, and that is so important to understand. And so let's take a look at some wet foods that we have here. I have a bottle of home canned apricots. These right now are shelf stable because they have gone through a canning process. The minute I open this jar, it is no longer shelf stable. And taking one serving out and vacuum sealing the rest, if it was up to here after I took the one serving out and there was this much left, I put my vacuum sealer on there and sealed it and put it back on the shelf. That is an invitation for disaster because it's still, once it's opened, it is no longer shelf stable because it is wet. So we're going to illustrate that by this can of tomato puree. So this is commercially canned rather than home canned. And the minute I pierce this lid and start opening the can, this is no longer shelf stable because it is now susceptible for anything that is in the air. Here we go. So this is out open to the air. So would you even think about if you only had to use a little bit of this and there was some left in the can, would you even think about putting this back in your cupboard just like this? Or even with a little plastic bonnet over the top of it? Would you think about that? I think many of us would say, oh, for heaven's sake, no, 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 no. In the ad, it showed the woman with some tomato sauce or tomato juice that she was making. She was putting it in a jar, and this is what she was doing. So if I'm only going to use part of this for my spaghetti sauce, and I have this much left over. So this is going to be used in a recipe, so that's gone. And what I have left over is this. No longer shelf stable because it is open to the air. But if I put my little vacuum sealer, my handheld vacuum sealer on it, and you have to really make sure that no liquid is sucked up. You notice I am not doing this with my Weston because it's capable of sucking so hard that it can pull liquid up. So I'm going to vacuum seal this. It's now vacuum sealed, and she was handing these jars of the freshly made tomato juice to her male companion, who was then putting them on the shelf in the pantry. And people were just having a fit over that in the comments. Just because it is vacuum sealed does not make it shelf stable. You must use cold storage, put it in 40 degrees or lower, so that's our refrigerator and our freezer, and it is not shelf stable. And this is whether it is vacuum sealed or not. But this idea of if we remove the air, there's no chance for spoiling, that is so false and so dangerous to hold that idea, because we have a number one dangerous organism that doesn't like oxygen. So if you pull all the air out and there happen to be spores of this organism, and yes, you've got it, it is botulism, then what it is going to do is have an opportunity. If you put it on the shelf, instead of putting it in cold storage, you will have an opportunity to grow the toxin. And even though that only occurs in low acid foods, well, what are low acid foods? Well, meats and vegetables. So earlier this week, Jim bought some asparagus. It's very out of season, so it's not the best asparagus, but it was the best that was available. But look, this is really nice. Now, I could store it in the refrigerator, or I could store it here. And I could vacuum seal it. Hit accessory. All right, this is now vacuum sealed. So if, and it's wet food, it's perishable food, so if I put it on the shelf instead of in cold storage, because if it's wet food, if it is wet food, we have to use cold storage. So if I don't put this in the refrigerator, then what happens? What could happen inside this very jar? Well, if there were any botulism spores present, and these conditions, all four of these conditions exist, then the spores would turn vegetative, they would grow and reproduce and produce that toxin. And these asparagus would be contaminated with the toxin because it's perishable food. Well, what are the four things? Low acid. Yes, vegetables are low acid because they have a pH above 4.6 on the pH scale. Low or no oxygen. I just pulled as much of the air out of here, and my Weston is very powerful. So I pulled most of the air and oxygen out of here. I've just created a low or no oxygen environment. That's what we do with vacuum sealing. And moisture. Is there moisture here? Well, the asparagus themselves are dry on the outside, but they're perishable, they're wet, there's water on the inside. If we removed the water, and we've done this before, we have, Jim, do you remember that time that we took asparagus and put them in a dehydrator?
And we had basically shoestrings.
They look like shoelaces.
They look like shoes, yeah.
Then at room temperature, I've got all four of those going right here, right now, because this is not in the refrigerator. And so sometimes that toxin can be produced inside these vegetables in as little as 4 hours. So this is going in the fridge. Now, what if I wanted to, instead of vacuum sealing them that way, what if I wanted to put them in the freezer? Well, just like the woman who was showing us how she was going to vacuum seal her corn, last night, I blanched these and then put them in an ice water bath to stop the cooking after I blanched them for 2 minutes. Then I dried them and I flash froze them. All I did was just put them on this little tray and put them in the freezer for a few hours until they're now hard. The reason that I want to do that is because if I'm going to vacuum seal these and put them in the freezer, I don't want my Weston to smash these down. The reason that I freeze them is to harden them up again, so they don't get ruined by the vacuum sealing. So this is a roll of material that you use for vacuum sealing, and it right now is a tube, but it's going to fit this. So I'm going to remove this accessory, and I'm going to put one edge right here and put this down.
Here we go.
Okay, we have a nice seal right here. Now I'm going to put the asparagus in.
Yeah.
And so I have my wonderful package of frozen asparagus. I can have this lovely spring asparagus in the middle of December because I'm going to be putting this in the freezer. The interesting thing is I have a little chart that does some comparisons, and if I were to have taken the asparagus that I put in the freezer and put it in this kind of a bag and put it also in the freezer and froze it in this bag, it would have been fine for about 10 months. This way, it's going to be fine for 2 years. And so it does make a difference. So the purpose of vacuum sealing is basically to extend the shelf life. And to eliminate botulism, all we have to do is remove one of these environmental factors. So we can't do anything about the fact that asparagus is low acid. It's a given, it's low acid. Low or no oxygen, it's vacuum sealed, so I had to take the oxygen out of this, so that's there in place. Moisture, you bet, this is full of moisture, but not room temperature. This is where we interrupt the botulism production of toxin is by storing this in the freezer because it can't happen in the freezer. And then when I thaw this, I'm going to be very careful to be sure it doesn't sit out on the countertop for 4 hours in the sunlight or something like that. So just exercising caution. So just to review, we need to remember dry food is shelf stable and we can store that at room temperature. Wet food, perishable food is not shelf stable. And both of these is regardless of whether or not they are vacuum sealed. Perishable food is perishable. Vacuum sealing doesn't make it shelf stable. So I hope this has helped you. I hope it's helped build your knowledge base so that you will be perfectly qualified now to when you see a ridiculous ad like the one for the handheld vacuum sealer. And the handheld vacuum sealer on that ad might be perfectly wonderful. I have no clue. But the way they presented it presented so much false information that it was very scary. And with your knowledge base now, you will be able to recognize that and any other misconceptions or omissions by anything else that you look at on the internet. So thanks for being with us for this, and we will look forward into the spring when we're going to have a book out that will cover this topic in even greater detail. So we will see you very soon for more videos.